All right, I'm here with Guy Odishaw. He is the founder of Bhakti Wellness Center and the co-founder of Cerebral Brain Fit Training. Guy, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is great.
Yeah, let's just jump into it, man. I'm curious, how did you get started with, why are you so passionate about the brain and that you actually figured, hey, I got to start a company? Because just looking at your website, you're extremely passionate. I've got a chance to talk to you, and this is something that you're deeply, deeply involved in. But why now this trend, this movement towards the brain specifically?
Sure. Great question. So the longer story is, I've been in the holistic health field for a little over 30 years, mostly on the orthopedic side. But then maybe 12 years ago, I got into bioelectric medicine. And this was just, I had a provider in my clinic who wanted to rent space, and she did bioelectric medicine, and I didn't really know anything about it. And I just saw miracles happening in my own clinic. And many of us were standing in the doorway of our treatment room watching this woman. She would fill my clinic. I had 10 treatment rooms. If a treatment room wasn't in use, she'd put a patient in it and treat them. And she might be running 5, 6 treatment rooms herself. And then if one of the providers was standing around with nothing to do, she would grab them, just like, come here, hold this, do this. And then she'd be off. And she'd have the waiting room would be full of people from morning till night. And some nights when I started kind of working with her, we'd be there till midnight.
Wow.
And she'd just be working on people, working on people. We'd have to go out to the waiting room and say, okay, folks, sorry, like we got to finish for the night. But what got me really, just fired up was seeing what seemed like miracles. People coming in a walker and walking out without their walker. One of her great stories was a longtime client of hers who was a diabetic and had this foot that was going south, but he would not let her work on it. And it got to a point where the foot needed to be amputated. He called her 24 hours before the surgery and said, can you help me? And she said, absolutely. She packed up, she went over, she worked on him for 24 hours straight, canceled the surgery. And she took videos of this. And you could see when she started, foot was all ballooned up red. You couldn't even, could barely tell that there were toes. You could see the dotted line of the surgeon for where they were going to amputate. And at the end of the 24 hours, it was an almost normal looking foot. And like that should be impossible. But she did that through bioelectric medicine, in that case, microcurrent therapy. And that was like seeing those things happening in my own clinic. That's where I was like, okay, I've got to do that. And that began me switching over to working, starting to incorporate bioelectric medicine into my practice. And then eventually that led me to more focus on the brain and doing neurofeedback and then neuromodulation, and then down the path of all the different, photobiomodulation, direct current, alternating current, magnetic, stim, and really doing bioelectric medicine specifically for the brain, although I still spend plenty of time on the orthopedic side.
Wow. Okay, that's amazing. Yeah, and I know as a coach myself, like there is, as healers, if you want to call it that, there's no ego. It's just we love to help people, and it's like, man, if you're seeing you can get better results doing this, and you gravitate towards that, and just hearing those stories, you can just see like your passion of like, yeah, I just want to help more and more people. If I can do it quicker and better and more efficient, then let's go and let's do that. So I can totally empathize with that. I'm familiar, and probably a lot of my audience is familiar with things like neurofeedback and maybe even some photobiomodulation like red light therapy that we see is so popular. But like, what's different about CerebralFit, and like, what are you guys doing differently than maybe like the traditional that we just hear neurofeedback clinics, for example?
Sure. Yeah. So I would say, where CerebralFit grew out of was myself and my partner in the business, Dr. Jeff Drobot, Biomed Center in Arizona and Providence, and just two practitioners. He's been at it 26 years, me a little over 30. Just chatting and kind of kvetching about what it takes to run a big clinic and just the headaches involved and the inefficiencies And one of the things, we were both into bioelectric medicine and just sharing how, with the technology we have today, we can do better in-home treatment today than in-clinic treatment 10 years ago. And so the question was really like, why aren't we doing more of this? We could simplify our lives. We could help more people. We could have better outcomes. It's more efficient delivery of healthcare, and it minimizes all of the headaches of running a big brick and mortar clinic.
So, Guy, for
So
example,
out of that,
sorry to cut you off.
yeah,
So I could reach out to
yep,
you and you could send me the gear. I don't know if I would rent it or buy it. I guess I have the option. I don't know. And then you could
yep.
train me based on my condition, whether it's, I don't know, Alzheimer's, ADHD, anxiety, depression. And then you could give me protocols and I would give you feedback and be like a check-in, like with a doctor or a coach, like every week we'll kind of optimize your protocols. It's kind of what it sounds like you're saying.
It's exactly that.
Awesome.
So I start off with people. We do a Zoom consult, kind of find out what's going on for them, and then I either ship them a device or a suite of devices, depending on what's going on with them or the household, because often we might be treating multiple people within the household. So we send a suite of devices. We hop on a Zoom. We go through how to use them, what their initial protocols are, and then yes, we just touch base over time as their treatment plan needs to be adjusted for the changes that are taking place. So what I like to say is with CerebralFit is we're not a technology company, we're a solutions company. And I think this is our point of distinction amongst other companies that might look like our competition is at the lead of the company, we have two veteran clinicians, people who have been in the treatment room treating people all day, every day for decades. And so that's what we bring to it, is not just here's a great piece of technology, good luck, but here's a great piece of technology and a veteran clinician to help you understand how to work with this device to get the changes you want. And I think that's the big difference with CerebralFit over many of the companies where you can just go online and say order a panel, great. But we have panels. The difference is when somebody calls to order a panel, they talk to a clinician who can understand their condition, who can advise them on the right panel to buy for their condition, and then how to use it, and then monitor them over time.
Yeah.
And I think that's our big difference, is we're really a solutions company. How do you use bioelectric medicine to overcome the health challenges you have? Or because all of these devices are really peak performance devices, they're about vitalizing and optimizing. They're not anti anything, right? Western medicine is, kind of, palliative care, cut it off, cut it out, medicate it, right? Like that's Western medicine, which when we need it is fantastic. And that's, not throwing shade on Western medicine, but
It's okay. I
they
do it all
don't
the
spend
time.
much
I have
time
no
focused
problem with it,
on,
Guy. I
yeah,
always tell people, listen, I will
good,
never go see a Western
good,
doc ever but I said I'm not an idiot. If I fall off the roof of my house right now and I need to have surgery, I know if my appendicitis breaks, I'm going to go see them. Like there's no doubt. They do a miracle
right,
job there.
exactly,
But for the
exactly,
regular things like what we see,
yeah,
for example, anxiety or depression, I would never go see a Western doc to have them like they're just not gonna help me. I'm sorry. So
no.
yeah.
Sadly, no. I mean, anxiety, 17% of the population has it. We've just learned recently how ineffective
17 or
SSRIs
7D?
are, actually. 17.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
it's probably more like 7D,
Yeah.
70, but statistically, according to studies, it's 17%. But still, that's an enormous swath of the population with this condition called anxiety. And then the main treatment within allopathic medicine being an SSRI, and we
There
see how low the efficacy is. And there's good
wasn't there just
studies,
a
meta
30
studies to
years
show
wasn't there just a 30-year study that came out showing they do absolutely nothing?
that was essentially the finding. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean,
Okay. Yeah.
not quite that bad, but yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Basically, that they're not better than placebo.
Yeah.
And so when we compare, say, something like SSRIs, so multiple SSRIs across brands, categories, molecules, and compare that against something like transcranial stimulation, we see that there's about a 300% difference in outcomes between SSRI and transcranial stimulation. Transcranial stimulation, more effective, no side effects.
And for people
Very
that don't
inexpensive.
understand, Guy, yeah, explain it. It's very transcranial. Like, I think you can buy a device for like $200, and just kind of explain. I mean, it's like,
Yes.
from what I've seen, you put a headband on and you just kind of dial in. I mean, I don't think it's not that much. It doesn't take that much effort, correct?
No. No, not at all. And so most of these devices are working on a microcurrent, which I always tell my clients, if you took a AA battery and you put your fingers on either end of the battery, you'd be getting more current than if you're running microcurrent. So it's a tiny bioidentical current, so there's nothing to be afraid of. And then you place it most commonly as ear clips, put ear clips on, but yes, you can get a headband. You can get, like, we have a fancy cap where you can use the 1020 system to locate so a more specific treatment for specific conditions. So we can get quite specific. But even at the general level, just ear clips and a barely perceptible current, what it does technically is it normalizes the resting membrane potential of the neuron, right? Normalizes the resting membrane potential of the neuron. What does that mean? So a neuron takes a certain amount of activation energy for it to fire. So a very rough, coarse-grained way to think about anxiety is neurons that fire too easily. So it takes less stimulus to get them to fire. And
Mm.
depression is the opposite. It's a neuron that takes more energy, so it needs more activation energy to fire. So you've got overfiring and underfiring and anxiety and depression. So if you normalize that, so why does something like transcranial stim work well for anxiety and depression? Because it restores them, neurons to their kind of normal, neurotypical, endogenous activation level. So now when that stimulus comes to you, maybe it's food, maybe it's your partner's voice, whatever the stimulus is, it lands on neurons in a neurotypical way. So you don't overfire or underfire, overstimulate or understimulate. So it's a very simple concept, works very gently, no side effects, great thing to do. And as you said, you can pick one up for not very much money. The difference would be level of sophistication. And I'm very much a believer in you want to have your kind of simple, right? There's, as my partner Jeff likes to say, can't hurt, might help, right? So you can have a lot of people just try the very simple form of it, and a significant percentage is going to get better, right? Great, like fantastic. But for some of those people, that the simple approach isn't going to work. We need a slightly more technical approach. So we have that. And then for another smaller subset, we're going to need a more technical approach. So we've got that. So that's why we can have this very simple approach, low cost, easy, will benefit a great number of people, but some won't. And then we just keep refining the intervention to catch those few people that are need a more specific intervention. So and that's part of that's what we do at CerebralFit. Is that's my job, every day when I'm doing my virtual consults, is to work through that with people to come up with what device or devices, because we might need to kind of rein in a couple of different parts of the body or the nervous system to get the change that we want to bring about for that person.
Yeah, and then typically, I'm just curious for anybody who's listening to this and goes, "I have anxiety, I have depression." What? And I know everyone's different. There's that bio individuality, but just in general, like, what are you seeing for the stickiness for something like transcranial stimulation working on them, the stickiness and long lasting effects, as well as, can they expect some changes after, I don't know, a few treatments? I have no idea.
Sure. So my favorite device for this group of people is the audiovisual entrainment. So it has three modalities. It's got visual photic stimulation. It's got auditory stimulation, form of binaural beats. Most everybody's heard of binaural beats. And then it has transcranial stimulation. So you've got three modalities that you can use together, separately, however it is for that person. Photic stimulation is incredibly powerful, right? A lot of our brain is dedicated to vision. So we can light up part of the frontal lobe, the whole optic chiasm into the back of the brain and the occipital. We can light up with photic stimulation. Auditory, we have a really kind of strikingly small amount of the brain that is dedicated to auditory processing. So we don't get that big of a bang. But when you add them together, photic and auditory, you actually get quite a bit of cortical real estate that is responding to the therapy. And then transcranial stimulation, it's like we call it a trickle charge to the brain. It's going to take weeks for a person to notice transcranial stim, but photic starts working in minutes. Like when we put people in neuroimaging and we turn on photic stimulation, 3 to 5 minutes, we can see the brain is changing based on the photic stimulation. So we just know that it works, period, right? It's not a question of does it. It's kind of like photosynthesis for plants. Like we don't question whether photosynthesis works. It's like, no, put your plant in sunlight, it does well. Put it in the dark, it dies. Like it's just 100% of the time we know photosynthesis works. Same thing here with photic stimulation. Now there's a question of what photic stimulation does this particular person, this particular brain need? That's an active question. The question is to whether or not, like, does it work? No, it absolutely works. We just have to find the right protocol for that person. Yeah. So I like the audiovisual entrainment device because often with our clients within one session, they're reporting noticing a change. Now it's small, it's not miraculous, it isn't magic, but anything where a person the next day says, yeah, I slept better last night and I feel a little better today. That's remarkable. So when we combine the photic stimulation for more of the immediate effect and the transcranial stimulation for that longer term effect, this is when we can really begin to change lives and nervous systems, with these technologies all packed into one device. And then the question about like how long, the way I think about bioelectric medicine is it's like nutrition, it's like exercise. If you go to a nutritionist and say, hey, I'd like to maybe lose a little bit of weight and I think I could be a little healthier and, can you help me put together a diet? And your nutritionist says, great, here's a diet. What do you think? Will this work for you? Sure, I'll do that. And then, you don't say, well, so should I do this once a week? Like, should I do this once a week for 8 weeks and then I can go back to eating my old diet? Like, that would be ridiculous. I don't doubt that there's people who want it to work that way. But if you're into nutrition at all, you know that it really is eat 3 healthy meals a day, every day for the rest of your life. Like, just do that because it's good for you, right? And it's the same thing with exercise, right? You don't want to go to the gym, work out, get the muscles you want, and then just don't go to the gym anymore and expect it to last. So we want to have the same mentality around the bioelectric medicine. It isn't anti-pathology, it's pro-health. That's the main focus we want to have. So yes, if you use audiovisual entrainment and you optimize your brain, do the symptoms that you were calling anxiety dissipate? Yes. Do you only do it because you want to get rid of your anxiety? Hopefully not. You want to do it because it's part of a healthy lifestyle that keeps your brain functioning optimally over a life course. It allows you to be the best you every day of your life for the rest of your life. And preventative against, mild cognitive decline, Parkinson's, dementia, the neurodegenerative diseases that can catch us later in life. This is a way to kind of hedge against those either settling in as early or being as devastating when they do.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's how I want people to think about bioelectric medicine. It's a lifestyle choice like diet and exercise, even though it also can be an acute intervention for something like a concussion. And somebody has post-concussion syndrome, you can use an audiovisual entrainment or a photobiomodulation to treat the acute symptoms of that and then be back to your normal self post-concussion. I'm fine. There's no residual loss of function. But even for that person, they would still benefit, not because of the concussion, but because of they have a brain and it can be optimized. And so you could keep using the device even though you're past the acute phase. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally makes sense. I'm curious because we were just we went on a tangent about anxiety and depression, which was great. But I'm curious, like, why are most people coming? Why are they seeking you guys out? What is kind of a common thread that you hear? I mean, is it TBIs and concussion, Alzheimer's, ADHD? I don't know, all of those things. I'm just kind of curious.
Mhm. So for CerebralFit itself, our biggest population is dementia. My sense of that is people are motivated by symptoms. And a person might have anxiety, but feel kind of like, I got it in hand, or, maybe I'm taking a medication and it's good
Just take
enough,
a pop a
whatever. So they're
pill.
not that
My life is
motivated.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But if you get a diagnosis of dementia, there isn't another solution.
Mm-hmm.
Allopathic medicine essentially has nothing to offer. Now, they will offer some things, but
You're
there's
right. There's nothing.
nothing showing that what they have to offer is helpful, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and they might even be harmful. So basically, from a Western medicine, allopathic medicine, it's untreatable. So that puts the person who gets that diagnosis in a much more challenging disposition of I need something. And I think that's why our largest pool of clients is in the dementia space, and then next probably in the Parkinson's space, and then we get into TBI and ADHD and things of that nature. But by far, dementia. And so our kind of we have a flagship product we call the CerebralFit Complete, which is the near infrared helmet, the audiovisual entrainment, and the nasal and ear lasers. So 3 devices. And so we call it the CerebralFit Complete. So most of my dementia clients that's what I'm going to end up shipping them. And the
Can you
recommendation
show?
is,
I think you had that. You're talking about that helmet, right? The
yeah, I
infrared. Can
did.
you show it for people that
Yeah,
are watching on the video? This will be great to kind of
sure.
see.
I can.
And I love that.
Yep.
And talk about that helmet because you know we were talking offline. I said, well, why can't I have an infrared red light panel. Why can't I just
Mm.
shine that on my head? What is better about? You look great, by the way. What is this? What is better about
Thank you.
the helmet? And just what can it do? I guess and hit certain areas and pathways that a regular infrared panel is not going to do. Is there any other data that you can pick up coupled with the helmet? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm 100% willing to work with people and panels. Right? Why a panel? Because it's more affordable. Now, I will say most panels are flat and most bodies are round. So I've never understood why panel manufacturers make flat panels. So CerebralFit makes hinged panels or moldable panels that although they are made of panels, you can bend and flex around the head, around the body, around a knee, around a foot, so that we can have the power density of a panel, but moldable to go with bodies. That's the only reason I got into doing panels, because there's enough panels on the market. The market does not need another light panel, but it was just treatment in the clinic and at home. Bodies aren't flat, and we just constantly struggled with how do we deliver an adequate dose of light to a body with a flat panel. And so we came up with, panels that you can mold, but they're not wraps. I'm not a fan of the wraps. As far as I'm concerned, wraps don't have the power density to have the medicinal effect we want to come. We still need a rigid form to have the power density because of the heat that's put off by the LEDs. The wraps can't tolerate the heat. So it is to say panels, fine, but it has to be the right kind of panel so we can actually get the light focused onto the area we want. So that's why the helmet. It's ergonomically it fits on your head. You're trying to treat your brain, put it on your head. It fits. It keeps all the light kind of in and focused in the direction that we want it to be. So it's very efficient in that sense, and it has a convenience factor. So there's that. But then the helmet also has quadrants. So it has kind of a right front, right left, or right front, left front, posterior, so that we can put light where we want it and not where we don't want it. And so that's also helpful. A little more challenging to do with panels is to be able to do that. And then pulsing. So we can pulse between 0 and 20,000. Mostly we pulse in the brain wave bandwidth. So from 1 hertz delta up to 40 hertz gamma, although sometimes we'll go higher into the gamma spectrum. So it allows us to do entrainment. So we can speak the language of the brain to
Mm,
affect brain function while we're affecting brain physiology. And so I think that's part of the knowledge base that comes working with people at CerebralFit is we're asking the question, what do we want to do on the level of brain physiology affecting mitochondria, affecting nitric oxide, reactive oxygen species? A lot of good research showing what's happening with mRNA and RNA in terms of information processing. And so infrared light can have an effect on the mRNA, RNA level. So that has to do with also with, genetic, repairing genetic mutations. So, being able to put that light in and affect physiology, but then also with the same device to be able to pulse so we can talk to the brain on the level of kind of neuronal activity and alpha and theta and beta and work with there gives us two ways to interact with the brain. Whereas if you have a panel, you at best have one way, physiology, and chances are a good amount of the light is actually missing the brain altogether and it's just bouncing
hmm.
off the head and scattering.
Yeah.
So that's why the helmet
Yeah.
is those reasons. It's just the right tool for the job. Like you can put a screw in with a hammer, but it'll be a mess. So, it's better to use a screwdriver. And that's the way I feel about like all these devices is they're tools and you just want to pick the right tool for the job.
Yeah. Very cool, man. I love this. Um, talk about, just a little bit, you mentioned electroceuticals and nutraceuticals. Talk about like what that means for somebody, and even that someone's been listening for the last almost 30 minutes now. We've been chatting, but this bioelectric medicine and really why you're just so passionate about it. We were sharing some of the work by Michael Levine. You were sharing with me some of that work, and just why I think people don't understand the power and that what they're doing by altering and changing the mind, how everything in your life can get better. And gave a simple example with just diet and fitness, but it just seems like if we start to work with this core component, the mind first, everything gets better. So kind of just talk about a little bit about that.
Sure, great. So a couple of things there. So there's Michael Levin. I'm a huge fan. Anybody listening, go Google or YouTube search Michael Levin bioelectricity. He's got a ton of talks out there. It's fantastic. So yeah, there's a couple of things. There's his theory that you alluded to there, TAME, technological approach to mind everywhere. So this idea that mind isn't just our verbal mind, that we think of the mind of cognition, that mind goes all the way down, and there's good research on the molecular and the quantum physics side to show that mind actually goes down to the chemical level and into the atomic level, but he stays in the biological level. So this idea that there's an intelligence at a cell level, and one of the ways, like so, William James' definition of intelligence, which is um, the ability of the intelligent entity to problem solve. So the cell has some goal. It needs to achieve that goal. There's some barrier in its way, and it needs to find a way around that barrier to reach its goal. And intelligence is the creativity that allows it to have more than one way to do that. And so many scientists have designed all kinds of really interesting experiments to show that even single cells have intelligence in this definition and that they can solve problems. There's a great one showing a slime mold mapping out the rail system of Japan. Right, so engineers spent a decade planning this optimal route for the train and where to put stations to optimize the whole thing. Then they tasked a slime mold with creating an optimum path to food, and in a matter of 24 hours, the slime mold basically made the same map as the Japanese railway system. And so it took engineers a decade to do the slime mold knocked off in 24 hours because because it's, like life is an efficiency engine. It's like it has an intelligence and an efficiency of how to meet its goals.
Yeah.
So this idea of how do we interact with mind at whatever level of the being needs to be engaged to solve the problem. In this case, if we're talking about health, so if there is a lack of health in the system, so disease, what level of the system do we need to try and address mind to fix the problem? So for me, to just put a little, like, where does the rubber meet the road? Well, one example, and I think this is a good one, I forget in the moment the researcher who said this, but in this conversation around mind is, he said in modern medicine, we have a pill that you can give somebody and it has an effect, but we also can give somebody a word and it can have the same effect. And you can just think about the placebo effect, right? And that, all the research we have on the placebo effect to show how powerful it is. And that's just the mind, right?
Yeah.
That the mind can be as powerful as a chemical. So this is just a way to kind of bracket this conversation. So how do we interact with the mind at levels that aren't the verbal mind? Because that seems obvious to us. You talk to each other, that's the mind. The rest of it, we don't know. And so for me, when I work with clients who have what's called central sensitization, which is an umbrella for things like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, irritable bowel syndrome. So some, maybe they're going to sweep kind of mast cell activation and some of the other autoimmune conditions kind of under that rubric of central sensitization. Basically, what the theory of central sensitization says is this is an information processing problem. The system, the parts in the chain of moving information around have lost the plot. Information is not being transferred the way it's supposed to be. And then this is what produces these different conditions. And so from my side, so for 25 years, about 25 years, I would say try and treat fibromyalgia the way most everybody else did, right? Through massage, acupuncture, chiropractic, exercise, diet, all trying to kind of fix the problem at the level of the physical entity. And it turns out that's actually that's not a helpful strategy. It's helpful in the sense that it can sometimes, for a short period of time, ameliorate symptoms, but it's not a path out because it isn't actually acknowledging and they're addressing the problem. The problem is the communication system. The mind at the cellular level has lost the plot. And so now I use bioelectric medicine, largely frequency specific microcurrent, to correct the information processing at the cell, the tissue, and the nervous system level. And so for the first time in my career, I actually have clients that no longer have fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue or central sensitization. They're people who would look back and say, I did have it, like that was true of me, but now I live a normal life. I get out, I exercise. If I get hurt, it heals. I pretty much eat what I want. They don't have the condition anymore. And like I said, I help people manage for 20 years. Thought I was being of service, but now employing this idea of working with the information processing, actually having clients kind of come to resolution who they themselves would say, yeah, I don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
That to me, that's the difference.
Yeah, that's so good.
Is working on that level.
I love that because, again, fibromyalgia, that's a physical ailment. Well, here you are touching the brain, if you will. You're changing the brain, the way the brain is interpreting pain and the systems, and that's what's healing them. Not that, lymphatics and doing all these other things might be valuable. No, you're changing the way the cells and the brain and everything's interacting. And when you change the input that the body receives, the body knows how to heal. It has that innate intelligence, like you said. It just needs the right input, and you're doing that with the CerebralFit. So I love that. That's amazing. I wanted to just ask. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, guy. Sorry, there's a little bit of delay.
Go for it.
No, I was going to ask you. It's really great. I wanted to ask you just kind of a question just regarding ADHD. You know, I have a lot of listeners. Myself, I'm a dad of a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. I'm just curious, like, has there been good success with that, or have you seen? I mean, I think ADHD, by the way, I think it's over prescribed anyways. As my kid has this, and a lot of times I have 2 boys. I mean, they need to be outside, they need to be running. So there's part of that. But yeah, I'm just curious. And to you is like, have you seen a lot of good success with that? Because I know that's a big concern for a lot of parents.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, great question. Thanks for asking. Yes, so one is a little bit of a tendency to pathologize boys, right? Just they're full of energy, they're rambunctious, they're not designed to sit in a desk and pay attention for hours at a time. They're not wired that way. They're wired to get out, run, break stuff, get dirty. Like that's what they're designed for. And so we have a little bit. But if we set that aside and we just look at a couple of things around ADHD, almost 90-95% of assessments for ADHD are behavioral. So it'll be watching the person doing what they do in their environment and kind of making notes about it, maybe having them do surveys, so neuropsych testing, maybe computer-based neuropsych testing. So it's all kind of behavior based. That's the standard model. What we do in our clinic is we do neuroimaging, functional neuroimaging, so QEEG and ERP. So we look at brain function. And right off the top, I would say within neuroimaging, there are 8 what we call phenotypes for ADHD. So 8 different types of ADHD. Well, you don't find that in the standard behavioral model. You don't find those 8 phenotypes. You maybe have 3. So we've refined it to a more fine-grained differentiation between the types. But then even within that, like when we do neuroimaging with people sent to us as with a diagnosis of ADHD, 50% of the time they don't have ADHD. So in our clinic, 50% of the evaluations are wrong. Nationally, it's 35% are wrong. But we see in our clinic about 50%. There's a number of different conditions that a person will have. So it's not to say that there isn't some dysregulation. It just doesn't fit the phenotype of ADHD. And the reason that it matters is if you have a diagnosis of ADHD, you're going to apply the standard fixes for ADHD. And if that system isn't dysregulated in the ADHD way, those fixes aren't going to work. Everybody's going to be frustrated. The fixes might make them worse. And that's exactly what we see. Parents are coming in and say, oh, I did this and my child got worse, or they're not any better. I'm 3 years in. And so we think like a proper brain-based functional neuroimaging to find out what's the dysregulation in this brain. And then once you know what the dysregulation is, what are the known ways to remedy that dysregulation? For us, that's a lot of the photobiomodulation, the transcranial stimulation, the transcranial magnetic stimulation, photic entrainment. These are the ways to then try and regulate the dysregulation in that nervous system. And if we're successful, what happens is the symptoms that were being labeled ADHD, you just kind of fall away. Even though you never tried to treat those symptoms, you just regulate the mechanism. It returns to its normal, happy functioning. And that's exactly what we see, right? Like our parents will, like a mom will come in and say, you're never going to believe what happened today. My son, got up before his alarm. He made his bed. He came downstairs. He sat at the table. He had breakfast with the family. He got his schoolwork together and he made it to the bus on time. That has never happened in 11 years. Like what's going on, right? And that's because there was dysregulation in his tiny little nervous system. And when we helped regulate that system, then he just did what made sense, which was get up, get organized, go to school. Like he just did that. He didn't have to be told, yelled at, cajoled, convinced, bribed, disciplined. He just did that because that was normative behavior in that household to do that. And we see this across the board. So yes, ADHD, I think the most important thing is get a good evaluation. And that's not to say like a good neuropsych is important. Like absolutely, we do neuropsych exams as well in our clinic. It's just we don't just do neuropsych exams. We also do the quantitative electroencephalograph, the QEG, and the ERP to look at functional activity in the brain. Like what we always say is like image the organ itself. You wouldn't go to a cardiologist that just had you fill out some surveys about your heart health and then said, oh, I think you're fine here, maybe take this statin and call me in the morning. Like you would not go back to that cardiologist. Like today, the gold standard would be to do a calcium scan of the heart to see how much blockage is there, right? That is going to be every bit as important as the clinical conversation with your physician around your cardiac health. And so we say the same thing, like, why wouldn't you scan the brain to look at its function and then marry that with the behavioral neuropsych results? But it's not done. It's like maybe 3% of the time that gets done.
Yeah.
So yes, and then our primary device is the audiovisual entrainment for at-home treatment. In the clinic, we would do neurofeedback. That's the what's the does the heavy lifting is neurofeedback, where you get the brain to rewire itself. The downside is that takes a clinic. So we're back to the brick and mortar. That takes somebody who's invested in the right equipment, which is probably going to be $50,000 to $70,000 worth of equipment to have the stuff that can really do the job, not sort of, kind of, but like good equipment, good software. And then a clinician who is trained and dedicated to sitting and watching the process moment by moment to be able to engage and interact with that person who's doing the training in a way that brain needs to be engaged with to make the changes. So it's a time intensive, it can be a cost intensive, and it's definitely a skill and resource intensive activity. So in that sense, it's just not accessible to everybody.
Yeah.
So that's why, again, CerebralFit. Yeah.
Yeah. That's huge.
So
love that, man. That is great stuff. I want to wrap things up in a little bit, and I'll ask you some final round questions. But before I do, I'm just curious, any exciting projects that you're working on at CerebralFit?
Yes. So the audiovisual entrainment device that we use, and it's not our device. We third party marketing for another manufacturer, but we use it because it's the best device on the market right now. Price point, function, it just is. There are other devices like it. They either cost the same or more with less functionality to them. So this is why we use the one we use. But we have one in development that I'm super excited about. It's going to update it to kind of modern interactive technology. It's going to have more functionality. We'll have more modalities built into it. And so I think what we're going to be able to do is really empower people with more tools in an easier to use device that is more flexible to I'm really into not having my clients have to buy a device for every symptom. I like devices that can treat a large number of conditions. And so this is going to be us kind of moving into that space of the again, audiovisual entrainment, neuromodulation, but packing in more modalities and more functionality into one device. And that's in development right now. So
very cool.
Excited about.
We'll stay in touch, and
I'll
have to have you come back on when that gets released. That'd be awesome to do a follow up about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome stuff, brother. I want to let's wrap some things up here. I want to kind of ask you some final round questions, and then we'll be sure to have you, let everybody know where they can find you and reach out to you. But I'm curious though. Were there any choices that you made, or maybe a choice that you made, or you think you made, that made you who you are today?
So let's see. Yes. So 30, I don't know. I don't like doing the math anymore. So I just let it be fuzzy.
A long time ago.
30 some years, a long time ago. I was in pre-med. So I was in like my kind of my third year pre-med, between my third and fourth year. And it was actually my mom who said, you should go to massage school. And I thought, like, what an obtuse idea. I'm in a small town from Canada, like massage. Okay. But, to me, it was like, I'm not having fun in college. This was a chance to come to the States, on my mom, come down here for a year and do this thing. And I really had no interest in the massage side of it. But again, it was a chance to just come down to the States and hang out for a year. And I would say I was about 3 weeks into my massage training when I realized, like, this is everything my medical education isn't. They're talking about people and like human beings as whole human beings and how to interact and engage with a whole person and help them heal. And medical school is nothing but biochemistry and pathophysiology and parts and being like a technician. And so absolutely, like, so that decision, which still to this day makes no sense to me, who makes that decision? But as I'm fond of saying, like, my mom was hoping she would have, like, be able to get free massage for the rest of her life. But actually, I moved to Minnesota. I stayed here, so I've been here for 30 whatever years. So, like, my mom's cost per massage is still like about $1,000 a massage. So I don't, I don't think she won that. But I'm certainly grateful that she made that suggestion. And I was crazy enough to follow it because, yeah, it absolutely changed my life and the path that I'm on. And I wouldn't be doing all the great things, wonderful and enjoyable things I'm doing if it hadn't been for that moment.
Yeah, love that. I'm curious, you guys are doing so much in the health and wellness world. I'm just curious, who inspires you? Or is there anybody that you follow? I know you mentioned Michael Levin's work, but is there anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, so Michael's probably like the number one. But then, like, so Carl Friston, his thing on kind of mind, architecture of mind, and like, but like, what's the underpinning in behind behavior? To me, that comes right in and fills in some of the gaps or informs what Michael Levin's trying to talk about with this tame technological approach to mind everywhere. I feel like Carl Friston's free energy theory kind of comes in and fills in some of the gaps. So I thoroughly enjoy his work. Um, uh, um, Dirk de Ritter. So Dirk de Ritter is kind of world famous neurosurgeon, um, mostly in the internally implanted brain stimulator side. But he's also an advocate for neurofeedback and neurostimulation. So here's a guy who's got a lab where he's got all of the toys. He gets to play like with brains. So he actually gets to work directly on brains and developed a cap to do EEG or QEG directly on the brain. And so I love following Dirk and his talks because he is right there on the front line with the organ itself. And he absolutely sees the correlation between what he's doing, working on the brain directly and doing implantable stimulation, and the connection to, say, neurofeedback and neurostimulation that is done externally, non-invasively, and 100% makes a seamless connection. So Dirk de Ritter to me is an inspiration down that path.
Very, very good stuff. Love that. I'm a big reader. Are there any books that just stick out that had a huge influence on you? I don't know if there's like one that comes to mind or a top three that you'd say, man, you got to go out and read these because they will have so much impact on your life.
Sure. So this is totally going to date me, but Ken Wilber. So I don't know if I say the name Ken Wilber, does that mean anything to you?
No,
And it's okay. You can say no. um, so unfortunately,
I knew Gavin
like
DeBecken, not
20
Gavin
years
DeBecken,
ago,
get DeBecker though. I know Becker's work, and a lot of people know that, so I know that one.
Becker,
But yeah,
sure,
Becker,
yep.
yeah,
So Ken Wilber is, no reason for anybody to know Ken Wilber except for the fact. So he's a kind of philosopher, and he's one of the most published philosophers ever, in that his books have been translated into the most languages and used in the most schools around the world. So given that his work has been enormously influential, nobody has heard of him. But I think, like, his philosophy was so comprehensive. His understanding of human beings and the human experience and the human brain and the human consciousness was so comprehensive. We're just now, 25-ish years later, beginning to understand, like, to be able to show, to prove that what he was articulating is actually true. It wasn't just a philosophy. He was articulating a fundamental reality. And so that's why I think he's still relevant, even though he isn't as, kind of popular as he was when he first came out and it kind of made a big splash. But his information is absolutely just as relevant today. If you were to go and look at kind of spiral dynamics and his whole kind of web of consciousness, absolutely. And this is what we see when we have, Carl Friston and Michael Levin and Ian McGilchrist, some of the main players in the academic world having their cross domain conversations today. What they're articulating is what Ken pointed out 25 years ago. And,
Yeah.
and in his work was just a collection of other people's works, but he knitted it together. So I would still say, like, if there's a body of work that a person wanted to go and dip into, Ken Wilber's probably still top of my list.
Yeah, that's great. Last two questions, we'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Mr. Cerebral Fit, Mr. Biohacker, are there any rituals or hacks or any practices that you like to do on a daily basis?
There are. So I use our devices, and again, it's because it's what I have in my house, but I would use somebody else's device if that's what I had. But I use my AVE every day. I use my helmet every day, and I use microcurrent as I need to. And so, yes, but I will say on a simpler way, and I love to use the word ritual, it would be get out in the sun, put your bare feet on the ground every day. I don't know what you're going to do if you live in Minnesota, where 6 months out of the year it's freezing, but figure out a plan. But every day, get out in the sun, put your bare feet on the ground. As you know, contact with the ground, you're grounding, and sun, and it's that combination of the sun and the grounding that restores the circuit in our body that was evolutionarily is a battery. And it's how we charge our cells is by these two simple things, sunlight and earth. And so that's my advocacy for people, even though, like, I'm totally, like, all the bioelectric stuff, I love it. Absolutely. It has its place. But I tell all my clients, like, if you don't want to buy my stuff, you don't want to use it, whatever, or buy the stuff and use it, but also get out in the sun on skin, right? Hours a day. Good research been out over the last few years to show that modern humans, we are missing about 93% of the access to red and near infrared light that our ancestors had. And when I say ancestors, I'm not 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 years ago, just 500 years ago. Just people spent more time outside. What choice did they have? They had less clothing on, so more skin exposed to the sun for more hours of the day. We have cut down our exposure to the sun to something down around 6-7% of what we evolved from. That's not good for us. Like, we think about the sun and vitamin D. Most people can say that. Oh, you get sun, you produce vitamin D. There are about 1,400 compounds that we produce internally because of sunlight. And so if you don't get out and get enough sun, your internal pharmacy is missing so many of its necessary ingredients to do the process of life. So that's my advocacy. Get out, get sun, ground, and that is going to handle a lot of it.
So amazing. I love that. That is a cheap and easy one, and I do it every day, and you couldn't be more right. Guy Odishaw, last but not least, where can people find you, connect with you, learn more about CerebralFit and all the cool things that you guys are up to?
So www.cerebralfit.com. So cerebral, FIT.com. So cerebralfit.com. Everything is there. My direct email, my direct phone number. They can go online. They can book a free consult. They can shop our products. So everything that they might need to contact or to move forward is right there on the site. So cerebralfit.com. That's the best place to start.
Amazing. Guy, thanks for being on the show, brother. I appreciate you.
Thank you. It's been a delight.